Are we alone? Could we expect to see the Flatwoods Monster or the Fresno Nightcrawler in line at Graders? Tonight we share your personal UFO sightings and tales of historical UFO visits to the greater Cincinnati area. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another wonderful episode of the Cincinnati Cabinet of Curiosities presents the Hometown Haunts podcast. I am your host, Kat Loco, and tonight with me are Jen Kohler and Christina Wald. And we're talking about UFOs tonight. It's fun, it's different. We have never done this before. If you want to catch us on social media, you can find us at Cin Cabinet Curio on Twitter and Cincy Cabinet of Curiosities on Instagram. And of course, we are dying to hear from you and your personal encounters with the paranormal and fringe history from your neck of the woods. You can send that to hometownhauntedmail@gmail.com or join us and share it on our Facebook group, Hometown Haunts. We're an official podcast that can be heard wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you, Jen. And if you would like to see us while we're doing the show, like right now, you can watch the video feed on YouTube. Find us by searching Cincinnati Cabinet of Curiosities, and please rate and review us wherever you listen to us so other fringe history and spooky entities, lovers just like you, can find us. Oh, we got a lot. But before we dig into UFOs tonight, Jen, come, unmute yourself and tell us about the fun adventure that you did this weekend.
Okay, so I'm guessing a lot of people that listen to us are fans of Supernatural. I'm a huge fan of Supernatural, have always been. And I finally was able to go to one of the Supernatural conventions. And it was in Indy this weekend. And I had bought my tickets in 2019 before COVID. And then I had to wait 2 years to be able to go. So, and I only went for one day because it is insanely expensive, but it is worth it. And I got a photo op with Jared and Jensen, Jared Padalecki and Jensen Ackles, for, if you don't know, they're the main stars of the show. And also Jensen Ackles and Misha Collins. And it immediately reduces me to a 12-year-old fangirl, even though I am a grown woman in her 40s. And I'm the same age as Jensen. Jared's a few years younger, but my stupid, dumb person that I am wanted to, you remember me telling you I wanted the Jared Jensen hug. Well, they weren't, yes. They were doing no touchy, so you couldn't touch. And no, they're very polite. No touchy.
They did not have a plexiglass, right?
No plexiglass, but they stood with their arms behind their backs. And if like you wanted an air hug or, you know, something, they just didn't like fully engulf you in a hug like they were doing pre-COVID.
Mm-hmm.
But Jared's shoulder did touch my shoulder. And then at the end, he did rub my back.
Oh.
And I literally squealed while the picture was taken.
Oh.
Like a crazy person.
That's weird.
But, and I don't know if it's because Jared Padalecki is so tall. I just beelined for him and totally bypassed Jensen. I don't think I was mentally prepared to look Jensen in the face because he is just as beautiful as you would think.
Ah.
And you walk into the room and you know they're there and they have this little partition so you can't see what's going on until you're like almost ready to go up.
Mm-hmm.
And you see them and you're like, they're real. Okay.
Yeah.
So I walked up and I just looked up at Jared and said, "Hi, I'm Jen." And he said, "I'm Jared."
That's cute.
And Jensen was being polite, trying to get my friend Christine to go into the middle between the two. And I told her, no, that's not what I wanted. So she couldn't talk either. And she just kind of flicked her fingers at him and nope.
Wow.
But then when we went to get the picture of Misha and Jensen, Christine just left me in her dust and just beeline to Jensen. And she wanted an air hug, right? Because she's the one that paid for this photo op. She wanted an air hug. So they were doing an air hug, and Misha and Jensen were facing her. And then I'm just standing there going, what the hell? And I was about to have a tantrum because I wasn't going to be left out. And then Misha turned towards me and let me in the picture. So it was nice.
You didn't post that one, did you?
No, not yet. No,
okay.
Yes, I did.
I didn't see the Misha one.
Yeah, it's on Facebook.
Oh, Facebook is so weird. It's so hard to see stuff. Like,
I know.
I don't know how they decide what you see because, like, I don't know.
Yeah.
But it was a lot of fun. It's time consuming because there are a lot of people there. We pretty much only had time for the photo ops because we went in, we got there, we had to do a COVID test because the test we did prior the results didn't come back in time. So you got to do that first. Then we shopped a little bit and spent way too much money on stuff I don't need, but also much wanted. Then we did the first photo op with Jared and Jensen. Then we did a photo op with Baby. There was a Baby replica there, the Impala.
Yeah, thank you for explaining that.
And that car, again, is just as gorgeous as it is in the show.
It is a very pretty car.
It's so pretty. And the guy, I don't know if they're a couple. It's a man and a woman. She was upstairs selling merchandise that was really nice. And then he was downstairs taking pictures with everybody because the car was just sitting outside. And he has to drive it from Texas. But I guess there's about five people, 5 Impalas that do the conventions.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, that was fun. We couldn't sit in the car, but like we wanted because of COVID, but we got some nice pictures standing next to it. And then we did a panel with Jaron and Jensen at 2:30, and that was it. But
it was the perfect day.
It sounds like good day.
It was fun. It was a lot of fun. We didn't even eat. I don't think I peed all day. I didn't eat all day until after.
You're hardcore.
I was focused. And then, once you look those two beautiful men in the face, you're like, did that just happened? That happened. That really just happened. So especially after waiting 2 years, actually longer, because when I first found out about the convention, it was a long time ago, and the show was still on the air. And I'm like, I'm never going to be able to afford to go, but I was able. So if you can go, do it.
Okay.
Go do it. Yeah.
That does remind me, like, Christina, have you met anyone in person who's famous, like, at a convention?
I almost trod on Martina Sirtis, like she was at Cincinnati Comic Expo, and I almost tripped over her. She's so tiny.
Yeah. Oh.
And I don't know if I would say I've actually. I mean, we went to see Felicia Day. I mean, I've seen a lot of people with our friend Katie and with Jen. And I remember when we went to go see Chris Hardwick, he knew Jen.
No.
Well, know me, but I always
have. Was like he gave her free stuff.
Yeah, well, okay. Explanation. Huge Chris Hardwick fan. After his dad died, I went and saw him in Chicago, and I didn't get to see him backstage to give him this thing I made. I made him a little glass tile of his dad, and his dad was a famous bowler. One of the top 10 bowlers of all time. And I tweeted a picture of it at him. I'm like, would you like these? I made these for you. And he's like, yes, I want them. So anytime I see him, I remind him that I'm the one that made the tiles. And I asked him, he has them in his office. And the last time we went to see him right before COVID, before shutdown, I was going to buy his bobblehead, because he had it for sale after a show when he was doing his meet and greet. And I'm like, oh, and I would like to buy a bobblehead. And he just kind of looked at it, thought for a second, and goes, here, you can have it. It was a very nice thing that you did. And I was just like, oh my God. Thank you. And I did not expect that. That is not why I did it. And I can't even tell you 100% why I did it. I just did, you know.
I think our funnest, I don't know if you'd call it a celebrity encounter. I guess he kind of is. We all went to Joe Hill's book signing a couple of years ago at Joseph Beth. And we got a family picture. My mom's in the picture and Troy.
Oh, fun.
He kept calling Troy Tom Savini. He was like, you look just like Tom Savini.
That's cute.
But that was fun. He did a great talk. I mean, we've seen a lot of really good performances and people. I mean, we've both seen Mark Maron a bunch of times. And when I first saw Mark Maron, I think it was in 2004. And it was at Funny Bone, and it was before he was really famous. So we got to talk to him for a little while. I mean, we've talked to him for a couple occasions.
Yeah, he's a cool guy.
Yeah,
seems like a cool guy. Yeah.
For Mike and I, the person that we've seen, we didn't wait in line very long, I'm sorry to say, but it's Paul McGann, who is one of the doctors. He's the one from the Doctor Who movie from the 90s.
Yeah.
And he was really charming to talk to. Like, we have a signed photo of him and everything. And that was also at Cincinnati Comic Expo.
Yeah.
Mike ran into the woman who plays Deanna Troi from Star Trek Next Generation.
Yeah, that's Marina Sirtis.
Okay,
that's the one I almost. That's the one.
Yeah, well, Mike did the same thing because
she's very small.
We were talking to Paul, and he turns around, and her signing table, was right next to his, and they just ran into each other. So, and Mike was just like, "Excuse me," and then his eyes got huge because he's a huge Star Trek fan. So, and he's planning on meeting my birthday buddy, William Shatner.
Yeah.
This year. So
better see him soon.
Yeah.
Let's hope he makes it a few more years.
Yeah.
Well, he just turned 90, so
He's 90?
Yeah, that was like the big thing. They were just like, because we saw, I mean, Jen and I saw him when he did his what was that? We watched Wrath of Khan, and he did like commentary, and that was really fun. And then we went to see his one-man show. I think that's why everybody was confused. We just had dinner, and Katie's like, "Well, I saw Shatner with you too."
Oh yeah,
just
like claiming ownership over Christina and Shatner.
Yeah, that was funny.
I was like, "Well, I've seen him twice."
You could
once
see
with Jen and once with Katie.
Actually, one of our best shows we ever saw was we saw Carrie Fisher live. She was at the Victory Theater in Dayton for 2 weeks, and we got tickets. We went with our friends Nicole and her husband. My mom and I went, and we were in the second row, and it was a great show. And I remember this one woman in the front row started to fall asleep, and Carrie noticed her and said, "Oh, I'm sorry, am I keeping you awake?" And the woman started stuttering and explaining why.
Oh
no!
It was very funny, but that was a great show.
Poor woman. Yeah,
it is a rush to get. They'll never remember you, but you'll remember it for the rest of your life, and as long as they're nice to you, there's nothing wrong with it.
You have Chris Hardwick, Jen.
Huh?
You always have Chris Hardwick.
I love him so much. Yeah. He just had a baby.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah.
Well, and you've seen Will Wheaton a couple times too.
Just the once. I met him the once.
I thought you'd seen him more than once.
Well, I went. I got his autograph, and I did a photo op with him, and had a little nice conversation with him about depression. I talked to him. Yeah.
Well, speaking of space.
Really speaking of space and the stars. That's a good segue. Just slide right into it. So, yeah, we have a fun topic tonight, and it's all about UFOs and aliens and the Queen City. And I wanted to make the note that tonight's episode is inspired by a Reddit post in r/Cincinnati. So go check it out if you haven't yet. Back on March 10th, 2022. The post is titled, "Is this a UFO over Cincinnati tonight?" And The photo has what looks like a V-shape pattern floating over the city, and it's a massive V-shaped pattern, not just like a plane. It looks like it should be a constellation, but it's way too visible with a photo. And the photo is looking towards Cincinnati northeast from what looks like originally Covington, Kentucky, and taken at 9:45 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And the user mentioned that they were seeing the same formation, or sorry, another user mentioned they saw the same formation north of Cincinnati around 10:10 p.m. And it wasn't Starlink. That was immediately. I kudos to the people in our Reddit thread. They immediately started looking for reasonable explanations as to this. And Starlink is just it looks like a train of satellites going by. So that wasn't it. And also, it wasn't flying over Cincinnati at that time. Wright-Patterson Air Force Base is located just within our region, and it is notorious for Project Blue Book. And MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network, is based right next to Lunken Airport here in Cincinnati. So we got a lot of buzz, um, extraterrestrial buzz around the city, and a lot more than I originally thought we had. Because I'm just like, Cincinnati. We're known for chili and Geta and the Reds, and now the Bengals that went to the Super Bowl. Never thought about how much aeronautics history we have around here. So, sources for tonight's show is Reddit. Um, for that aforementioned post, the Cincinnati Enquirer, multiple times over, the Mutual UFO Network, also known as MoveOn, the National Archives to look through Project Blue Book, the Des Moines Register in Des Moines, Iowa, the Courier Journal in Louisville, Kentucky, the Dayton Daily News, Smithsonian.com, the Cincinnati City Beat, and Greg Hand of the Cincinnati Curiosities blog, which is not affiliated with us, but he's a friend of the show. So, hey there, Greg. Also, want to take a quick mention to say that we know the term UFO is now considered obsolete, believe it or not. The term UAP, or unidentified aerial phenomena, is now used by government officials and those who seriously research the phenomena. But we're neither, so we're going with the vintage UFO moniker. So, yeah, this will be fun. I went into a deep dive. I looked through Project Blue Book. I looked through MUFON's site logs. It's taken me a good week of solid poking around, reading articles. We have the Cincinnati Enquirer and the Dayton Daily News have a lot of great vintage articles detailing just basically extraterrestrial phenomena, and it's been fun seeing, just like when we looked at cicadas last year, how everyone reacts to UFOs through the decades. So we're going to go way back to 1947. So between 1947 to 1969, there was 12,618 UFO sightings, which were reported and investigated by Project Blue Book. Of that, 701 reported sightings were unable to be identified by the U.S. Air Force. From 2001 to 2015, there have been 120 reported UFO sightings in the greater Cincinnati area. And I like to point out that I was the cause of one of them. I know I talked about that in an earlier episode, and I can come back to it later. So, July 5th, 1947, a rumored UFO crashes in Roswell, New Mexico. I'm sure anybody who loves the paranormal has heard this story. Ufologists believe that the apparent spaceship that crashed was transported to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, just a few minutes up the road, up 75, in Dayton, Ohio, and stored in Hangar 18. Does this make the Cincinnati-Dayton area more prone to UFOs than any part of the country? Maybe. We're on the top 10 list consistently. The first UFO sighting in Cincinnati was reported by the Enquirer on July 8th, 1947. So that's 3 days after the Roswell incident occurred. Just weeks after the first UFO report by pilot Kenneth Arnold around Mount Rainier in Washington state in June of 1947. Numerous eyewitnesses accounts reported seeing flying discs throughout the greater Cincinnati area. This is also the same day July 8th, that the press release for the Roswell incident went out to the public. So keep that in mind. Everett Smith of Walnut Hills told the Enquirer reporter that he saw 3 or 4 flying saucers streaking through the sky, saying that he first thought they were shooting stars, but after watching them for a few minutes, I ruled this theory out and decided they must be the discs everyone is seeing. Just a little 1 year later, there was the Mantel UFO incident in Franklin, Kentucky, which Franklin is not within our metro area. It's in southern Kentucky, but this made national news. And I believe the man that it happened to was from Maysville, Kentucky, and also lived in Louisville. So on January 7th, 1948, the Mantel incident involved the crash and death of 25-year-old Kentucky Air National Guard pilot Captain Thomas F. Mantel while in pursuit of a UFO. Historian David Michael Jacobs argued that the Mantel case marked a shift in both public and governmental perceptions of UFOs, citing that this UFO case went from citing that in popular culture, UFO cases went from being whimsical. Man, I can speak tonight. Whimsical musings about aliens, like these fun little stories about the man in the moon, to suddenly there was more concern over Earthlings' welfare and introduced the idea that aliens could be hostile. So that all stems from this 1948 incident. Uh, then we had something called the Norwood Searchlight incident of 1949. Have you heard of this? Just shaking heads. No, I hadn't either, but it's much like the LA alien sightings in the 30s, I think it was, or the 40s. So this was a searchlight incident. It really needs its own episode to take a deep dive into this, and we can do that later this year. But basically, a Cliff Notes version of the incident was a searchlight swept through the skies of Norwood on the night of August 19th, 1949, for the Jitney Carnival at Norwood's Church of Saints Peter and Paul. So they had gotten this searchlight just as this fun carnival edition. They had gotten it from an army surplus store. That night, balls of fire floating through the sky were reported around the region, and the searchlight managed to get one of these balls of light in its beam, and it freaked out everyone. Um, and these balls of light appeared around the city and were reported up through 1950. So for a good basically 2 years throughout 1949 and 1950, people were seeing mysterious balls of light. This is not uncommon, and there's more sightings of that later. In 1952, the term UFO or unidentified flying object was coined by the US Air Force. So it's actually quite a recent term. October 5th, 1959, in Deer Park, a 13-year-old witness reported to the Air Force that they saw a 150-foot long cigar-shaped craft with several windows glowing from within. However, and this kid, it was 13-year-old, hand-wrote the note and submitted it to Project Blue Book. The Air Force wrote an interesting footnote to their report, and they stated, subsequent reports from the same witness indicate that he reports any object of light in the sky with his own interpretation that they are flying saucers. There's also the strong probability that some of these reports are imaginary. So, sounded super judgmental there. In 1968, a housewife who was active in the community reported to see a flying saucer chasing a plane just east of the current Northgate Mall. It stated in the Enquirer, she saw an airplane in full moonlight with rounded circle of light trailing the plane some distance behind the plane. She reported this incident out of concern since TWA Flight 128 had crashed on November 20th, 1967, so the few months prior to this report, while approaching the greater Cincinnati airport. This crash resulted in the deaths of 70 people out of the 82 on board. In this case, however, the UFO in question, after being investigated, was caused by a small Cessna airplane which was towing an electronic advertising sign. The U.S. Air Force was able to match the flight schedule to this specific Cessna, with many of the UFO reports made around the city and the region. So, we go to 1973, where Cincinnati and the tri-state region saw a UFO hysteria. So, ufologist Kenny Young is quoted saying, "The unusual aerial events happening during the October 1973 time period remains one of the most fascinating of all UFO happenings, an intense and disturbing siege that no dismissive hypothesis or explanatory venture will easily rob of its strangeness." I particularly love that quote. So basically starting in mid-October of 1973, there are hundreds of reports around the region of strange unidentified flying objects, and they are described in any way you can describe a UFO. So there were so many, in fact, I could only take some of the most widely um, reported reports reported reports from here. So we're going to be jumping around a few days, but most of these were actually happening a few days before Halloween of 1973. And also for our listeners, if you happen to know of any of these stories and would like to submit them in, I would love, as well as Christina and Jen, to read them, because this is a very interesting little bit of local history happening here. So, October 26, 1973, Springdale resident Keith Merrill, a commercial pilot himself, described seeing a UFO while at the Tri-County Shopping Center. He reports to the Cincinnati Enquirer, "It hung up in the sky to the east, and to the naked eye it appeared to be a bright light through binoculars. It seems to have a hazy blue light around its middle." Merrill noted that to the reporter that he and 4 others watched the UFO for 25 minutes, adding that it would occasionally fade, then reappear. Around that same time in Zanesville, Ohio, sheriffs respond to a report and see 3 pulsating glowing orbs hovering over a graveyard just outside of town. In Greenfield, police officer Sergeant Hugh, after chasing for several miles a circular white object with a yellow glow that was humming and flying just above the trees, he told the Cincinnati Post, "I've never believed in UFOs until tonight." One of the remarkable things to come from this was then Ohio Governor John J. Gillian's comments about UFOs. He had a close call with what he said was an amber-colored vertical beam of light. Shaken, he felt compelled to tell the America during an emotional press conference that the UFO threat was real. He is quoted saying, "I saw one, a UFO, the other night. So help me, I'm absolutely serious. I saw this." He also lost the election the following year. Just a historical note. October 31st, 1973, however, started bringing out the pranksters. In Indiana, and I think around Lawrenceburg, police had spied on pranksters preparing to launch homemade hot air balloons made of balsa wood and plastic dry cleaner bags and birthday candles for liftoff. That's pretty clever. Then in Xenia, Ohio, 3 men, like creatures with silver skin, were spotted walking along US 35. Scared out of their wits, drivers called police, who were quickly on the scene. These creatures, however, turned out to be local high school age pranksters wrapped in tinfoil. That had to be uncomfortable and chafing. Fun thing, and hopefully we can put this up either on YouTube or on our Instagram. Nationwide Insurance put an advertisement article in Sunday, November 4th, 1973's edition of the Cincinnati Enquirer, claiming that, yes, UFOs were covered under existing auto policies. And the clipping is great. It's just very tongue-in-cheek. It is important to note that in October of 1973, Wright-Patt had a lot of air traffic taking off from the base due to Operation Nickel Grass, which started October 13th and went till November 14th. Operation Nickel Grass was a strategic airlift operation conducted by the United States to deliver weapons and supplies to Israel during the 1973 Yom Kippur War. It went on until November 14th, as I stated before. So that could explain a lot of the mysterious traffic that people were witnessing in the skies at all times of day. Though the glowing orbs, I don't think that explains it too well. 1992, witnesses claimed to have seen several flying saucers being tailed, then circled by fighter jets. Then they claimed that the three saucers were hit with a red beam or orb and crashed to the earth without a sound. So that was on the west side of the city. Sorry, I got my timeline a little bit mixed up. January 1985, going back a little bit, the Air Force issued an official denial that Wright-Patterson Air Force Base houses alien space technology and the bodies of beings from other planets. So they have an actual press conference. You can find the articles about it, them saying, yeah, we don't have any of this. Stop saying that we do. In 2013, another busy year for UFO sightings here in the tri-state area. Many were bright orange lights that split into four, did precise movements, and then joined back together and faded. Another report from later that year was reported that this UFO sighting happened during a Turpin football game. Reports seeing a bright orange fireball over the sky, and these fireballs were seen up through 2014 as well. Also in 2013, unclassified documents state that more than half of the mysterious UFOs reported in the 1950s and 1960s were that of high-flying spy jets such as the U-2 and SR-71. So those would have been tested probably around here. October 2019, a silver cigar-shaped craft disappeared over Cincinnati. It was witnessed by someone driving eastbound on Route 50 from Indiana. And then December 2019, driving on I-75 southbound, witnesses saw a glowing tic-tac hovering in the western sky without sound around 6:30 p.m. And as mentioned earlier, the Mutual UFO Network, MUFON, moved its headquarters back to Cincinnati in 2021, in June of 2021, to a space on Airport Road next to Lincoln Airport. MUFON reports that 92% of their reports are explainable, adding that when someone sees three lights in the sky in a triangular pattern, such as the Reddit post that started all of this, generally it's an airplane. The unexplainable UFO sightings generally appear in this shape that aren't similar to modern aircraft, such as saucers, teardrops, or even squares. And then finally, and we'll put up a photo later, it's from Dayton Daily News. Building 280, once the PO dining hall for the World War II German POWs at Wright-Pat Air Force Base, houses a large series of murals painted by the soldiers that depict green gremlins, or as a lot of people like to speculate, they're aliens. Because at the same time, Wright-Pat may have had some alien visitors. So, the fun thing is, there are no reports of alien abductions from the tri-state area. So, go us. However, there was a woman, I think around the mid-90s, that reported that her cows were abducted from Kentucky. And because I like to look at things from multiple points of view, what could these UFOs be? Starlink, as I said before, the planets, especially Venus, satellites, the International Space Station, it is super bright when it flies over Cincinnati. And also debris burning up in the atmosphere, which I have personally witnessed. And it's super spooky when you see it. So that is a condensed version of UFO sightings in Cincinnati. So, what do you think?
It's really interesting. I mean, has anyone here been to Roswell before? We went to New
No.
Mexico a few years ago, and it was, I think, 2015, and I made everyone take a detour to Roswell.
Oh, that'd be
Troy at first
fun.
was skeptical, but he enjoyed it. I mean, they really have made it into sort of a tourist destination. But the thing that was interesting was how much Cincinnati stuff there was because of Wright Pat there. They even
Yeah.
had a Jim Borgman cartoon on the wall about
Oh, that's
aliens and
cool.
stuff,
Oh,
which was
wow.
awesome. And it was really interesting. And we ran into someone I was sketching, and I think it was say in Santa Fe or Albuquerque, and somebody came up and started talking to us about, a relative of his had been there for Roswell, and he said, "Oh, there was something like he started telling us about his personal experience." So it was fascinating.
Wow. Yeah, I've been to New Mexico. I've just never been to Roswell. The closest I got was Santa Fe. So,
That's pretty far away, but it's worth
yeah,
the trip. It's worth the drive.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's on my bucket list to go visit.
We also went to Los Alamos,
Ooh.
and you are supposed to, like, you're not supposed to take any pictures there, and that's supposed to be where all the a lot of weird stuff's supposed to happen there. It's supposed to be more PhDs per capita than any
Hmm.
place else in the world,
Hmm.
or in the US. I don't know in the world, but US anyway. And that also has allegedly a lot of weird research and hijinks and that sort of thing.
Oh, fun. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've always heard about um Right Pat and Hangar 18 just
Hmm.
whenever you're into anything paranormal. Like my ghosts are my jam, but aliens still manage to seep through the zeitgeist. So that's how I
Hmm.
learned about Right Pat, and I was super surprised. I don't know why when I first moved here to find out that Right Pat was literally down the road.
Yeah,
So,
it's an hour
and it
away
has
or
a
less.
museum.
Hmm.
So, and
Yeah,
we
we
have a
sketched
lot
there
of
quite a bit.
yeah, and a lot of astronauts are from Ohio as well.
The
So,
most,
the
actually.
most.
That
Everyone
just
is just
tells you how much
blasting
people
off to
love
get
to
out
live
of
in
Ohio.
Ohio. They want to leave the world
Yeah.
after they come here.
See, Ohio was not a boring state. I had
No.
no idea that there were that many sightings. I do remember when I started scanning in photos at work, I went for the UFO folder, and there really wasn't much photographically, at least in there. Most of it was all older stuff, but I do remember reading about some of what you talked about. I think specifically the Norwood one,
Yeah, that one
but
was huge.
yeah, but there weren't any photos there in there,
There's
was there?
one photo that you may have seen. It's from
Okay.
like 1963,
Uh-huh.
and it is from the flying saucer phase of the UFO craze,
Mm.
and it was, I believe, taken by a parish priest, and it is very obviously a frisbee in the air. It's
That's pretty
just a
funny.
really obvious
Uh-huh.
frisbee, but
That's tickling my brain
yeah,
memory there.
it's a pretty infamous like photo.
Fake.
I've seen it outside of just learning about Cincinnati. I didn't know it came from Cincinnati,
Hmm.
but it's almost as good as the pie plate on a string over like
Yeah.
a mountain.
Hmm.
I do have to say, if it really is aliens, that makes me extremely uncomfortable. I don't
Well,
know. I'm not scared of ghosts necessarily. I am scared of aliens. I don't know why. It
You don't
freaks me
want things
out.
probing your butt, Jen?
No. Mm.
Mm.
I think it's more that I don't want to be kidnapped and then left in space for the
No
rest
one wants to be kidnapped,
for the
generally,
rest of my life.
that's true. That's true. Or left in space.
or left in space
Yeah.
with no means of oxygen.
Well,
That's
it
not
was
going to
interesting.
last very long.
Well, no. At least it'd be a
We
quick
were all
death.
talking before we got on about a friend, and one of the friends of the show that listens, Pat Ann, will know who I'm talking about. There's an artist that's from Columbus that had a UFO sighting in Columbus that Jeff Smith actually used in his comic, and it was like this giant craft that they saw these lights, and she was there with several other people, and it's substantially, we looked at the picture, it must be in one of his graphic novels where he kind of describes where he got the idea for it, and it's
Mhm.
huge.
Yeah.
And stuff like that, it's always hard. Is that a UFO? Or, I mean, let's just talk about the Pentagon budget here. There is a lot of stuff that they're always working on and testing that probably flies around that looks UFO like because it's weapons testing and
Mhm.
carrier testing. I mean, when I saw that photo, it kind of made me think of some sort of transport, perhaps. Many people saw the stealth fighter when it was
Mhm.
being tested and thought it was a UFO
Oh, yeah.
because it looks very very UFO like. It's a big black thing that flies in the sky
Well,
silently.
it's your
It's not on
classic
radio.
triangle.
Yes,
Well, yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and it's hard to imagine things that haven't been invented yet, especially if an aircraft doesn't look like what we're used to,
Mhm.
Hmm.
then your brain just can't make sense of it.
Yeah, and it's the same with drones when they
Mhm.
started being made. A lot of UFO reports made by people who are watching drones, and that's the
Mhm.
2013 incident where somebody's like, "There were really precise movements," and I'm like, "Yeah, that was probably a drone, like a really
Yeah.
early
Yeah, you have
drone."
to test them somewhere.
Well, yeah.
And that reminds me of my UFO story.
No.
And I know I've told this on the show before, but it may have been a few months ago or even over a year. So I caused a UFO incident a number of years ago, maybe about a decade ago for New Year's. A friend of mine had Chinese lanterns, and at the stroke of midnight, instead of lighting fireworks, we lit these paper lanterns. And just like some of the hot air balloons, they rose with these candles. And they were very pretty, and we made little wishes and we watched them fly away towards Indiana. And oh, yeah, this was about 2013 because I was in touch with the guys from MUFON when I was on my previous radio show, and he was on a radio show maybe a month later talking about UFO sightings around New Year's, and he's like, "Oh yes, we saw a group of about 6 glowing orbs flying through, and we got many reports from the west side of Cincinnati stating that they saw this group." And I'm like, "Um, I know exactly what those were because I'm responsible for one of them." And explained to him on live radio
Oh
that
no.
I caused a UFO sighting.
Well, you took the wind out of his sails.
Oh, I
You
did.
did.
It crashed silently just like that saucer did. And,
Aw.
but we're still friends. He still talks to me, so I think he appreciated a really good explanation. Um, the UFO guys, as well as the Bigfoot people too, the, explorers and ghost hunters, good ones. We all really love just explanations, real world explanations to really fabulous, fantastical stories and sightings.
I mean, there are lots of really. I mean, and thinking about again the Pentagon budget and stuff, and Bright Pat has a lot of, like we were talking about the POWs that were there. They were all part of Operation Paperclip, where apparently if you're good at making rockets and stuff, it doesn't matter what you've done before. A government will hire you to work on them.
Yeah.
And so a lot of propulsion systems and rockets and stuff for the space program was developed by these POWs from World War II.
Hmm.
And they were mostly not nice people.
No. But
Um,
every year for New Year's, they would launch some paper lanterns into the sky and just watch the UFO reports roll in.
that would be funny if they did. Well, we did that. Somebody I had a 40th birthday party, and somebody gave me one of those lanterns, and we lit it, and we watched it float over Cheviot. And I always
Hmm.
wonder if anyone said anything.
Probably. And a lot of the reports when going through MUFON, and this is me editorializing here, the people who are reporting these, one, if they aren't from like 25 or 30 years ago, so extremely excellent memory for that,
Hmm.
but also some of them just sound like they're high as hell or drunk.
Well,
Like just with ghost reports too,
Yeah.
it's you start being able to figure out who may have not been completely there when they saw this.
now here's an interesting question, because I talked to a couple people before the show that had UFO experiences but didn't want us to talk about them. Why do
Oh,
you think people are more sensitive about it than they would be about, say, a ghost story? Have you noticed more of a taboo? Do people feel like they'll be considered more crazy if they talk about UFOs than ghosts?
I would think so.
there could be that. So I will say there are a lot of interesting phenomena that are reported by both types of paranormal experiences. So one of them would be sleep paralysis, and depending on how you lean, it could be the old hag sitting on you, or it could be aliens. Another one is owls. Some people will mention seeing at the foot of their bed, they'll wake up in the middle of the night and see like either an owl in their window, or they'll see a skeletal being at the end of their bed near the window or looking at them from the window. And could it be an alien? Could it be a skull-like skeletal phantom? Maybe. So you have a lot of similar yet described slightly different experiences. And with ghosts, I don't know. It's with ghosts versus aliens, which would be an interesting comic. I think part of it may be just embarrassment. Like, ghost stories make for a good yarn, but alien stories are just purely in the realm of sci-fi. And then you also have people who are like, because we've make fun of it. I even made a butt joke earlier, like the probing jokes and all of that. And so people may be a little bit more hesitant to share alien experiences because of that. I do know a few people that also have UFO sightings and they don't want to share them on the show, even anonymously. They don't want to talk about them at all. And for a lot of people, just seeing something that is supernatural outside the TV show is so remarkable, they don't quite know how to process it. So that's definitely with a lot of people that I have talked to when I was a much more active paranormal investigator. They'll see something that's shocking because if you're not prepared to see the supernatural, you're shocked. You don't know how to process it. You're trying to make your entire worldview has just been shaken. So, okay, Jen, go with your thought.
I can't remember what podcast I heard it on, but there was this. It might have been Criminal. I don't know. This multiple family members and neighbors had seen this same thing, like at different parts of their neighborhood or their city where they lived at the same time. None of them ever spoke about it ever.
Wow, because they were afraid to.
I don't know. I don't think they understood.
Yeah.
I think there might have been some fear there about, being called crazy, or they just could never fully understand it. So they just didn't talk about it until I can't remember when, but I really think it's fear. I mean, it's easier to think that a ghost is someone used to be a person that we could have known. It could
It's
have been,
very
it could be a
sweet.
loved one. Yeah.
Yeah.
But then when aliens is the one thing that we cannot say for certain. We just cannot.
Just looking at it just from a human perspective, which is a weird way to phrase that. It's the ultimate stranger invading your house. Like if it's a ghost of a family member, that's someone you once knew, and that can be very, very sweet. But for anyone who's been abducted, like abduction is just everyone's afraid of being kidnapped. That's a universal fear. It's not a monstrous one. That's a universal fear. So being abducted, those stories are preying on your fear of disappearing and not seeing your family again. And then also just aliens coming into your room and looking at you, like that's really, that's very invading. So invasive. And I could see why people would be uncomfortable.
I mean, it's creepy when a person stares at you while you're sleeping, even if you love that person. Don't do it.
Yeah. Don't do it.
Don't do it, please. And don't take a picture of me while I'm sleeping without my consent. Thank you.
No.
Well, remember never to do that.
Thank you.
This just reminds me of the first movie of Twilight. Like, that's not romantic in any way.
It's interesting because this could segue into another show, because somebody that listens to the show sent me a bunch of stuff about the hag story, because she had a haunting story in Cincinnati like that. And she looked up a bunch of stuff on the hag and sent me all these links. I think I sent the ghost story. So maybe we could talk about that in a couple of weeks, and how ubiquitous it is in human experience.
It is very,
it is very common.
Yes.
it sounds like a very scary experience,
Mhm.
sleep paralysis and that sort of thing. And I went sketching with her just a couple weeks ago, and she was still talking about hauntings and sleep paralysis and stuff like that. So
Mhm,
we'll
mhm.
have to do an episode about that.
Well, I know
Yeah.
I've mentioned on here before, one, the movie Close Encounters of the Fourth Kind
Mhm,
Hmm.
with Mila Jovovich. Apparently is it based on a true story about alien abductions in Nome, Alaska,
mhm.
Hmm.
and it involved owls and everything.
I
Yeah.
think I've seen that one.
Yeah, scared the ever living.
It is scary.
It scared me so bad. Scared me. I'm like, I'm never going to Alaska. I'll look at the pretty pictures. Thank you. And then I slept with all my lights on that night. Like that was
Yeah.
going to stop aliens from abducting me.
Oh my goodness, you just brought me back to when Unsolved Mysteries was on, and
Mhm,
anytime there was an alien story, I would run out of the room,
mhm.
and I was convinced for a really long time that they were sitting, waiting, and staring at the windows in the dining room, which is where the staircase led into in my parents' house, and that I'd have to run past the windows as fast as I could to get up the stairs so the aliens wouldn't see me.
Yep.
I was
Wow.
Yep.
like 7,
Yeah.
but,
No,
it
I'm
was
right there
just
with you, Kat. I
and
mean, that's
there's
why I never open my blinds at night.
mhm,
I don't want anything staring back at me.
That would freak you out. Like having something
Yeah.
stare back at you is probably
Yes.
one of the scariest things. You know, there's a great TV show about alien abductions called People of Earth, and I think we talked about it when we were at dinner. The
mhm,
show was re- conceived by the same person that did Our Flag Means Death. It's
mhm,
the same person that came up with the show, and
mhm.
it's
Okay.
really hilarious about alien abductions. All these people like start a support group because they're being abducted by aliens,
Oh,
and
Yeah.
that sounds
I
fun.
think you can watch it on Hulu. So you will have to check it out because it was on either Hulu or Netflix. I can't remember which, but I saw that you can stream it. It
Mhm.
probably will be more available streaming because Our Flag Means Death is so popular.
Yes.
Mhm.
But People of Earth was really funny. And I almost don't
Yeah.
want to say too much about it because A, spoiler alert, and B, I don't want to. My mutant ability is to retell something humorous and make it not funny.
Oh,
Same, Christina. Same.
I haven't seen it. Though I do have an interesting story that I'm not sure happened, but I think
Mhm.
did. So it's along these lines with the owls and trees. So when I was really young, I'm going to say about 4 or 5 years old, when you're just starting to remember memories with your families. I remember getting up in the middle of the night and looking at the through the window of my room. And in that case, at that house, my bedroom was in the back of the house. So it would have been looking at a forest. And sitting in the tree was not an owl, but a very, very rotund looking, this is weird, Buddha character. And not Buddha. I'm not, it's just whatever it was sitting cross-legged, and it had big eyes and big old grin on its face and shark teeth. And I remember staring at that,
Whoa.
closing the blinds as fast as I could, and diving underneath the covers. Now, like
It's
I
no wonder
said,
you didn't like Unsolved Mysteries.
yeah, I hated that.
That sounds like
But
an entity of some kind.
it reminds me of an entity. I've drawn it once as a sketch. I could draw it again because I'm a bit more used to drawing monsters now. But it was a really weird experience. Was it an alien? I don't know. Was it a really fat owl? I would really like to think so, but that mouth was not an owl's mouth.
Wow,
Was
that's
it
really
me
creepy.
dreaming? Possibly. I was 4 or 5. So this is a really, really far back recalled memory,
Mm.
but it's bothered me for 30 odd years now because I'm just like, was that a dream? Was that not a dream? What was I seeing here? Because I still remember it as clear as day.
Well,
So,
aren't
Wow.
you afraid now that you put it out into the public arena that it's going to happen again?
well, now I'm prepared. I'm gonna be like, hey, I'm gonna interview you. Let me go get my
Okay.
microphone.
I would run screaming.
Yeah. Now it may eat the microphone. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Maybe it doesn't
But
speak English.
maybe it doesn't speak English. Maybe it goes bleep bloop. I don't know. But it's
Well,
a
I mean, this
series of
could.
clicks.
There's so many things we could go off topic on this. Like, I think we
Mm.
really should do the hag thing, and
Mm.
Mhm.
you know, there's so much UFO stuff. Like, this is just the tip of the iceberg. You know,
Yeah.
there's so many stories about research on these sort of things, like at Los Alamos, at Wright Pat, and there's a lot of interesting things about propulsion technologies that they think are being, and then there's also those really weird stories about um, some sort of craft
Mhm.
appearing outside of nuclear sites and powering down nuclear missiles. That's a
Mhm.
whole thing that's been like reported on the New York Times and
Mhm.
Washington Post when they changed the name from UFOs to what's the new name?
UAPs.
It's I think they just did that because branding wise it's just not as catchy.
No, but I
Yeah.
keep thinking of UDF. So, and then I
UFO
want
just
ice
has
cream.
UFO just kind of rolls off the mouth pretty
It really
well,
does. It
know.
rolls
Well,
off the
it
tongue real
does.
easy.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. But there's so much to talk about, but more shows for sure.
yes.
Yeah.
Shall I
Do
take us out then?
yeah,
Well,
I think we can wrap
okay.
this up. Oh, well, say what you were going to say,
Well, I was
Jen.
going to ask you, do you want me to talk about my UFO dream?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes,
Um,
please do.
because I've had it a couple times within the past year or so.
Mhm.
And I think the first one I had the dream around when it was announced that the government said that UFOs are real.
Mhm.
And it's just like all of a sudden, one day, this big voice from the sky is saying, "You've got so much time to get your act together. And if you don't, we're going to invade."
Die.
And there's a whole bunch of panic and fear about that. And then the second dream was the same thing, but then they were taking people up into the spaceships. But then it was more, it was kind of like, and then somehow the dream morphed into me being an astronaut and working on a spaceship. I don't know. Makes me wonder now if something was beaming into my head since we have so many sightings in Cincinnati now.
Mm.
And I live in
That's
Coleraine,
really
which is right
weird.
by Northgate and right by
Mhm.
not too far from the airport. So
Yep.
How many times have you had the dream?
about twice now.
Wow. And so I mean, it's hard to say context in dreams because it's so
Yeah.
nebulous, but what did you like did it just sort of leap into did you see entities or did you just
No,
it
it
was
was
just you heard
just
them
a
say if
voice.
you don't get better then
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. And normally I can figure out why I've had a dream,
Mhm.
like because I'm stressed out or something's going on, or I've just watched a weird TV show. And the
Mhm.
only thing I can relate it to was, them announcing that UFOs are real and
Mm.
that for whatever is a deep seated fear I have. And it doesn't make any sense, but
Mhm.
who knows? There's got to be something out there. There's got
Wow.
to.
That's a
Well,
spooky set of dreams.
that is a spooky
Yeah.
set of dreams. I
Well,
mean,
and since I started on my antidepressants, it has given me really, really vibrant, strange dreams.
Wow.
oh,
And
interesting.
it was kind of fun waking. I wish I could remember them all because sometimes I would wake up in the morning and I'm like, wow, don't know where that came from, but all right.
I have a couple friends that keep sketchbooks by their beds to record dreams and stuff like
Mhm.
that. I've wanted to do that, but it turns out when you have someone sleeping in bed with you, that's extremely rude.
Yes. Well, and then you're fully awake and then you can't go back to sleep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like pulling out the sketchbook and turning on the light, it turns out gets you
Yeah.
kicked out of the bedroom
Yeah.
Yeah.
pretty
I,
quickly.
I should write them down. And
Yeah.
But I'd like to. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean,
it's
Fun
sometimes I'll
fact.
forget them and then all of a sudden I'll be doing nothing or I'm falling and it just pops into my brain again. And it's like, oh, I had forgotten about that.
Right. Well, fun fact, Witches and Sorcerers is based off of a dream I had
is it
many,
really? I've
many,
been
many years
enjoying
Oh,
ago.
reading it. It's a
okay.
great story.
I
Thank
need to
you.
catch up. I
Yes.
had caught up
I
a
love the
couple.
idea of the intern.
Yeah, it's I don't know why. It's popped into my head that she was an intern and then the character Key popping in and out of these portals through garden gates.
Mhm.
It was interesting.
Yeah.
So it turned into this fantasy series that I wrote, and I expanded on the dream, but that one I managed to write down in a notebook before I
Oh, good.
forgot it.
Good.
So, yeah, that's this fun fact. That and my other series, Miss Gray, was also based off of a dream I had, not about gray aliens. I'm sorry if anyone's getting excited there, like gray aliens. No, it's about a Grim Reaper, and slaying monsters, just like every other shonen series in the world. Anyway,
Well, on that note, we could talk forever, but we have to
we
save some
can.
for future episodes.
We do, and we'd love to hear your stories, dear listeners. If you have strange stories about looking through the window and seeing a strange shark-toothed creature staring back at you, I'd love to hear about it, as well as Christina and Jen. So you can send that to hometownhauntedmail@gmail.com. You can join our Facebook group at Hometown Haunts. And also you can follow us at Sin Cabinet Curio on Twitter and at Cincy Cabinet of Curiosities on Instagram. We love hearing all of your stories, ghosts, aliens, cryptids, Bigfoot, all of them. And it's a safe space too. It's we get it. As you've heard, we see a lot of things. So please like and subscribe and share the show with everyone else. And for Jen and Christina, good night and stay spooky. Bye-bye.
Bye.